Good afternoon and welcome to the Emerging Tech series of the Leadership and Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Gavin Savage, and this is the podcast where we speak to technology executives, founders, and leaders. And today I'm very lucky to be joined by CTO of Ledgebrook, Nathan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Very happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you. And yeah, we were just discussing the weather here. I'm melting like a popsicle in the sun. I think that's what you call it in the US, popsicles.
Popsicles, yeah, and I think I was saying that being from the southeast, like melting and like a popsicle is kind of like my favorite thing to do. So I love the heat.
We call them ice lollies in the UK. It's
Ice logs.
ice
Oh,
lollies, so you get
ice
lollipop.
logs. Okay,
Ice
yeah, that
lollies.
makes more
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
I thought it was an ice log. I don't know, piece of wood.
Not quite. But like before we get into everything about Ledgebrook, what you guys are doing and everything else we're going to chat about, I think it'd be great. You're not traditionally from InsurTech. That seems to be the theme from those in the tech space. It'd be great if you could give us an introduction to really how you get into tech and also how you ended up in InsurTech and working with Ledgebrook.
Yeah, my my background's a little weird. So I've coded from a young age. My brother and I were building Telnet RPGs back in the 90s. But that's not what I went to school to do. I went to school for finance and accounting, actually. And I did that for the first year out of college and master's program. I got my CPA and I absolutely just dreaded going to work every day because it was boring, it was monotonous, and um, I wanted to do something a little more creative. And when you tend to do creative things in the accounting world, you tend to wind up in prison. So I switched to, I got lucky. I had an acquaintance that wanted to build a software company that did accounting for law firms, plaintiff firms specifically. So that's how I got my start back in the tech world. Founded that company. It didn't succeed. We did that for a couple of years, and then for the next 15 years, I was mostly in healthcare. I did one place I started. There were 15 or so engineers. By the time I left, there were 2,000 employees, and we did the IPO and all that fun stuff. And then some time in fintech, mostly as a principal engineer. How I got to Ledgebrook, I actually wanted to start my own business. I'd built this product that works with Kubernetes that sniffs network traffic to generate API documentation. And I talked to a venture capital group, a couple of them, but one in particular, and they're like, "This could work, but we just invested in this company and they need a CTO. You should talk to Gage." And I didn't know anything about insurance. I didn't know anything about Gage, but I was blown away by both him and then what he described as the what he was trying to fix in insurance. And I did a little due diligence, but signed up about a month later.
Mm, interesting. That's very much not a traditional route into tech. I can definitely empathize with the accounting stuff. I was in my previous life training to be a lawyer, and I will admit, come 1 p.m., 2 p.m., I was literally falling asleep at my desk
Yeah, yeah,
with
I feel
boredom,
that.
and I knew at that point when my eyes were going at 2 o'clock, it was probably time to start considering something a bit more exciting. And anyway, but
I,
yeah,
it's
interesting.
funny. I have the CPA, but like I don't tell anybody. I call it my scarlet letter because as soon as it's mentioned, people are like, "Oh, can you help with my taxes?" Like I don't even do my own taxes. I pay
Yeah.
people to do that.
Yeah, people probably would ask you if anyone that knows me, and knows that I did law, they won't be asking me for legal advice, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Unless they want to cook the books or something. But anyway, I wanted to, before again we kind of get into a bit more, Ledgebrook, uh, been going for a couple of years now, been a really exciting time. You've joined kind of midway through that journey, but could you just explain for the listeners a little bit about the Ledgebrook business and what the mission is?
Yeah. So the mission is we want to be the next Munich Re, which sounds, very lofty.
Mm.
But what we are is a tech forward MGA, that marries the best of both tech and insurance. We've got over 100 years of experience with insurance industry veterans, and 100 years of experience with a small but nimble engineering team to brings the best of software engineering practices from different walks of life, but not insurance. We marry that together. Our mission is speed. So it's, the fastest to get back to brokers, fastest to quote, fast to rate and indicate and make sure that that process is very, basically picture perfect for our underwriters and also for our brokers.
Nice. Nice. That's succinct. That's something that's probably used to pitching that a lot.
Yeah, well, we've gone to enough conferences and talked to enough investors now where you've got to have it down pretty pat. Your elevator
Yeah.
pitch, 30
I mean,
seconds, right?
what was that? Yeah, I was going to say, what was that? 25, 30 seconds? Nailed it.
I don't know. I didn't time it, but I probably have in the past.
Um, and yeah, we saw it. We announced that, a lot of these podcasts end up coming off the back of that. At FinPro, we just show that interest and really announce, those that are at the helm of innovating in InsurTech. But what was the experience like for you as a CTO and for the business? Like, do you think the kind of, I know the rules, the game has changed in somewhat and what they're looking for, but just from your experience, what did you take away from it and how was it?
In terms of like coming aboard, right after the seed round.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was very. Uh, it wasn't what I was expecting at first. So I when I came on board, they had a fractional. We had a fractional CTO, and we had a contracting company on the dev side, and they did a great job. But I got there, and after a couple of weeks, they're like, "All right, we want to go live by November 1st," and I started in October, I don't know, 11th or something. It's like, okay, where is um, the business requirements, the documents? I was like, they were like, what? I was like, the requirements for what the system has to do so that we can actually rate, quote, and bind. And they're like, we don't have that. And so that was kind of an eye-opening, transition. And the other thing that was interesting is, the expectations, I guess, are from the industry, from the insurance industry veterans, we're pretty low. And what I mean by that is, I'd be like, okay, we can get these forms done. You give me a new one, we can probably turn it around in 24 hours. We don't want to do rate changes. We can probably turn it around in, a week or two with testing. And they're like, wow, this is stuff that normally take months to years. And so it's been fun kind of being able to be like, this is how we can, make these transitions and these changes like very quick and be able to keep with that speed adage.
Mm. And I mean, I guess that probably makes sense from expectation point. I mean, Clearco and previous companies in health tech that you were working at, they were quite significantly larger in terms of like they would have had that process, they would have had those elements probably upon arriving. Other than joining how big was the business when you joined Ledgebrook? How many people?
Uh, Less than 10 full time.
Yeah, yeah. Was it a bit of a culture shock, or did you just kind of run with it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the culture shock portion was like I was the only the tech person.
Mm.
Which that means you do everything from why is my email not working to how do we implement this ECS container to run on whatever. And so that was a bit of a culture shock, but I've always preferred smaller organizations in general, just because you don't have to cut through so much red tape in order to make the changes that you want to make. And so, that's part of the reason that I've left other jobs is they've gotten more people and more bureaucratic. It just, became a little more monotonous in terms of what I was able to do.
Mm. And that, it's always something off camera when I'm speaking to CTOs, when you look at the definition of chief technology officer within a 400 person company and a 10-person company, the things that you're doing in a 10-man company in comparison to that, ecosystem of 400, like as a CTO, for you, what are the main challenges? What's the biggest difference in terms of your role, two opposite ends of the spectrum?
Hmm. And it's funny you say that because honestly, it's changed a lot since I even started, right? So like when I started, and some of this is still the same, but I was the IT support, I was, the lead engineer, I was the product manager. So it was doing all those pieces. It was setting the game plan for what we were going to get done in the next 3 months. It was helping people set up their their new computers and Slack integrations, and it was building out the actual underlying rating app and underlying policy administration system. Since then, I've hired 6 engineers and a product manager, and so the role it's changing a little bit, right? Because now it's a lot more um, delegating down and managing the new team members and making sure they have everything that they need to make sure that we can build the product successfully. So the role, well, I still do some coding and I still do some of the product management stuff. It's been nice to have people that are better at it than me that I can work with and not only help them, but they can teach me stuff along the way.
Mm. And even when you're describing that, for me, that would sound like an engineering manager, the being close to your team and, taking them through the day to day. But it's just interesting the definition of a CTO as you move up the realms of scale of company. It changes quite significantly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, after the Series A, Series B, you start getting into, 20, 50, 100 engineers. There's this inflection point that you kind of have to decide as the CTO, like, are you going to be more of the managerial with direct reports that in managing the employees, or are you going to want to spend more time in the code base? For the most
Mm.
part, once you get to a certain level at 50 to 100, you're not going to be touching the code anymore, right? You're setting
Yeah. Yeah.
strategic direction and you're setting budgets for everybody underneath you and trying to get everybody to point towards the North Star. And
Mm.
well, that's starting to happen here. But I still love getting into the code base and helping out that way too. And one day I'll either have to say I can't do that anymore, or I'll have to go back to another startup and figure out how to do that again.
And the market that Ledgebrook focuses on, what you guys have built, it's focusing on that middle market, excess and surplus within that kind of specialty insurance arena. An area which you and I spoke about again when you were attending events. You would mention E&S, and people's ears would perk up. I remember you saying that. Like, in your opinion, I'm actually having a lot of conversations from a search perspective and from a podcast perspective of those in E&S. Like, why is the space so hot right now? Like, in your opinion, what is it about? Why is it gathering so much attention and excitement?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few reasons. One is just because of rate increases that have been going up. I mean, even in personal lines, you see like people are moving out of stuff in Florida, and your auto premiums are going up. People don't want to do California because of fire. I mean, it's the same thing in commercial general liability. Um, so that's one reason. The other reason is a lot of stuff that are in the admitted market, outside of E&S, are getting pushed down for whatever reasons. They have too many losses. They're in this new class code that they've added that no longer can fit in the box of a admitted carrier, and so we're getting a lot of things being pushed into the market. I mean, it's at 2021 in the US, I think it was $50 billion in total addressable premiums in the commercial general liability space for E&S. So it's huge. Um, the reason that people's ears are starting to perk up when you say ENS is because they look at some of the businesses that are in here, and like they look at Kinsale as an example, um, and they see that their combined ratio, which is their loss ratio plus their expense ratio for is like under 80%, which is great return on investment. So when investors see stuff like that, they're like, well, how can we start getting into this market? I mean, a couple other reasons are it's unregulated a lot more so than something in the admitted market, and there's that leads to a lot of ability for innovation and changes that you wouldn't necessarily get um, in the admitted market, right? Because like if you wanted to make a change to your rating calculation to drive more premium, a lot of times that's stuff that has to go through regulatory bodies, and it just takes a long time to be able to implement those changes. So that's another reason I think people are excited about the ENS market.
Hmm. And what sort of industries do you then kind of hone in on? Like you talked about um, potentially with some catastrophic elements in terms of wildfire, but like, using a really loose examples from construction or whatever, what industries are you finding that you're helping brokerages kind of sell insurance into?
Well, what I love about Ledgebrook is we have a very broad appetite because we have a lot of people that have worked in various niche industries so that we can handle a lot of different industries. So, predominantly we do manufacturing and construction, but we do some habitational, we do some hospitality, we do retail, and anything in between. Now, if you look at other places, most of them are very niche. Like they focus, like I do New York construction, or I do California residential, but only apartment buildings and only ones that are over 5 stories. And so that's kind of where we differentiate. It's one of the ways that we differentiate ourselves compared to some of the other things that you see.
Mm. And in those industries you kind of touched on, none of them are technical at all. They're set in stone. They're very busy industries, hands-on physical activities. Is that is that just where the excitement comes from? Trying to transform an industry that almost doesn't really even want to consider technology or insurance because it's just like they just want to hand it to a broker and just like sort that out for me, you know?
It's a good question. I mean, that's part of the excitement. For me, I think what you're alluding to is, it's antiquated in a lot of ways, and
Yeah,
I saw
yeah.
that in healthcare, similarly to what we see in insurance. A lot of time, one of the things that actually got me to take this job was when I was doing my own due diligence, because Gage would told me about some of the people were still relying on Excel to do their rating calculations. But I talked to a few brokers through my network, not that I knew, but I got put in touch with, and they're like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I actually still print out the pieces of paper and like do the math by pen and paper.
Yeah.
um and so when I hear that sort of thing, it's like your ears perk up, right? Because it's like, well, that is something that we can automate, that is something that we can do better, faster, more accurate. And I think that was one of the big things that got me excited about this.
Yeah, it's funny when people, I mean, I know a friend that has a construction business and it's all these documents, everything that is his business is all in paper. He's up in Scotland. So,
Yeah.
you know, um and it's like what happens if you get hit by a bus? What happens if your building goes on fire? Like it's
Yeah.
just bonkers.
It's crazy,
Um
And one of the things I love, just bringing in the different software engineering people that we brought in. They've all been in different industries, so it's like they have a different viewpoint of how things have worked well in other software engineering organizations. And so it's been fun to try to incorporate those pieces as we build out this product. And every little thing we do for our end users, the underwriters, they're always like, wow, this would have taken months or years to for us to make this change.
mhm. Yeah. No, it's super interesting, and I get it. I mean, that's why I got into insurance from the executive search side, to work with these businesses that are in turn transforming an industry. Like, it all goes back to my origin story of joining FinPro, whereby I had to get life insurance. I've got a daughter, and the whole process was 7 or 8 cold calls. And at the end of those cold calls, I got 2 pieces of paper in the post to sign. And I'm just like, well, just email me it and I'll docu-sign it. And it's like, what? So I was like, okay, well, this makes a lot of sense, actually. So yeah, very interesting. And of course, at the heart of the Ledgebrook platform, it's a low, no code offering some interesting kind of partnerships, but you opted initially to build that MGA low code technology at first and then transitioned into partnering with Socotra. So it's kind of like a buy and build feature.
Yeah. And it's something that you deal with in every organization in my seat. It's like, when do you build and when do you buy? When
Yeah,
do you low code? When do you no code? The
yeah.
way that it started, so before I got here, the idea was that they were going to build the whole thing from scratch. They were going to build the underwriter workbench, the policy administration system, the data warehouse, the federated API on top of it, and everything in between, which
Mm,
in theory, sounds great, but, is way behind on over budget and all that stuff that comes with it. And by 6 months in, nothing was actually done.
mm,
uh, for me, somebody told me, and it stuck with me on the buy versus build decision. Like, if you are going to, well, let me rephrase this. If it's not something that it's, enter your favorite colloquialism, it's like your secret sauce or your competitive advantage, or something like that, and it's not going to break the bank to buy it, you should buy it. So
mm,
when I think about the policy administration system, like the ability to quote and to bind and to issue and to cancel and to endorse and to be able to send those documents out, that's not going to differentiate Ledgebrook at all. So that's when we went with Socotra. It's low code for being able to configure it to suit your product needs, but it also gives you the flexibility to do the stuff that's important for us. And for us, in my opinion, the stuff that's important is, a lot of how do we put hand data in the hands of the underwriter to make their decision quicker and easier, remove that administrative crap that they have to do with their other jobs, the other places they've worked that's taken up 50 to 60% of their times, and really empower them so that they can make the better decisions to price risks.
mm. So what I mean, it's such a competitive space. The amount of conversations that I have that people are aiming to do that. Make the underwriters' job easier, provide them with data, allow them to do the more human part of their job, and that's when we see companies utilizing the AI. But maybe you can't give it away, but what's the secret sauce to if it's not the low code, the policy admin system, because you've integrated Scotcha. What is it for you guys and for you personally at Ledgebrook?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Gage has said all along is it's speed.
Mm,
If you look at the wholesale brokerages that are,
Our customers in general, like they'll send out an email and wait for a response for weeks, right? Sometimes days on the best case scenario.
mm,
And what we do is we make that process hours. And soon as we start working on our binding authority product, it's going to be seconds and minutes. And so from my standpoint, that is, building out the rating algorithm so that we can price things quickly, building out the rating algorithm so that as changes come in, we can incorporate them quickly and get better pricing to our underwriters. It's, being able to quickly classify something and triage it so that we know that the risk coming in the door is something that we don't want to touch and we can throw it out and not waste time on it. Those are the things that are Ledgebrook's competitive advantage. And that's what makes us, better than anybody else in the MGA space right now, because not only are we faster, but we have that breadth of appetite so that we can look at things that most people can't. So when you're a wholesale broker and you're thinking about, who should I send this to? It's like, well, I could figure out which niche market. I can go through my Rolodex and try to remember that, or I can send it to some place that I know that looks at almost everything that we send them.
Nice. And the kind of low no code element to kind of rewind, I guess, I hear a lot of different definitions or a lot of what it means to different CTOs and how it's run. Like what does the whole low no code piece mean to you? Does it mean a less onerous process of maintaining the platform for the customer? Is it low no code in both ways for both Ledgebrook and the customer? Like, what does it mean to you, and how do you think it's evolved?
That's interesting to think about. Especially, that most of my background has been around actually trying to build stuff. And I think that when you think about it from a business perspective, right, it's like everybody knows that engineering is expensive, especially
Yeah.
to get the good ones and to get it done correctly. And so as you grow as a company and you try to figure out, how can I reduce some of this cost expenditures? When you hear low code, no code, it sounds really good, right? Because it's like, well, I can use something like Zapier and not have to build out the Google Gmail integration to push stuff into S3, or I don't have to build out my underwriter workbench or anything in between. What ends up being tricky with it is, and this is what I've mostly seen, is it's great for proof of concepts and very small pieces that you want to have it do. Once you start growing and finding edge cases and things that are unique to your business that this low code, no code solution just doesn't handle, most of the time you're going to have to end up building it anyway. So the hard part is finding like that nice balance about what you can leave with the no code, low code solution that you trying to predict the future, that it's not going to be able to handle these things. And what are you going to have to build yourself? And I think it kind of goes back to the build versus buy a little bit, but it's the same idea in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And you talk of the being able to produce a quote from months to days to hours, and then I was going to say, well, the goal's got to be minutes, and then you said seconds. Um, so maybe milliseconds is the next one after that. But
Yeah.
from the quote, you're very involved in the claims side of thing as well. Right through.
We actually, going back to the build versus buy, what differentiates Ledgebrook, we decided it wasn't going to be how the claims handling process. So
Yeah,
we have a third party administrator that we push that
Sedgwick.
on. Sedgwick, that's correct.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, for me, as I'm learning more, probably much like yourself about the space, claims for me is quite a fascinating area because it's the one that customers always, it's I think for me it's a reason why I chose who am insured with because of if we get to the claims process, I just know it will happen. It will probably be quite seamless. I hope not too
Yeah.
painful and drawn out. But obviously that's kind of bad for insurance. It's such when you really, really think about it, it's quite a bizarre industry, insurance. But, I do appreciate that the technology can speed up the logging of a claims process, but it's that whole capacity issue. And if you manage the claims, can you then pay out the claim? Because usually it goes back to an insurer that then, so you can process it as quickly as you want, but then it could still take 6 months for it to get paid out type thing. So I just find the whole claims arena, it seems to be the most underserved, but for me, it seems the most obvious to attack with technology and make the whole process just completely pain-free.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when you think about why does insurance exist, right? I mean, it is to pay out claims in case of these things that happen, but
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, my own experience from the personal claims filing has been a nightmare to put it. Um, but I'd be interested to see when you go to the conferences, right? There's a lot of people, a lot of vendors that are there that are selling things to make the claims process better, or using AI to predict when a claim comes in, like what's more likely to go to litigation, and so there's definitely some innovation happening in that space. But I'm with you. I'd love to see something that would make the process better, and if you could sell that as the insurance company to the underlying insured, it's like, if you do have a claim, then this is the experience you're going to get, and I think that would resonate with the customers.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not so much the insurers, but certainly the customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of conscious of your time. I wanted to talk about the culture that you've built or helped to build so far. It's led by very much insurance veterans at Ledgebrook. Most of the team, however, is tech. So it really kind of makes up that insure tech piece really nicely. Uh, you know, what is it that you think? Because reading loads of things online and chatting to you, that kind of phrase that stuck out to me from Ledgebrook is that talent density is our North Star. Like, what is it that you think makes the team so unique? Is it just, yeah, what is that?
Um, makes us unique. I mean, I think you're touching on it, right? Like it's the ability to combine what people who have been in this industry for 30 plus years already have known, and see what can change to make it better, and bringing in technologists and software engineers from other industries that have seen things that have worked well, and combining those two things together. So that's like a very high level, right?
Yeah,
But in terms of the actual people that we target, we are the culture of builders, right? That's what we look for. We like people that have built out their products. They're product engineers. They built out teams. They built out big books of businesses. They're not afraid to start from scratch and build something out that way. That's a lot of what we look for when we do our interviews from a cultural standpoint.
mm,
Giving examples of times that you've done, you built something from scratch.
yeah,
And when they come in, you can see it, right? Because they take the ownership of the things that you give them, and they get excited about building out these new pieces. From my standpoint, it's like pieces of our new product lines, or making the rating system better. Like that's the sort of attribute that we really look for.
mm. And do you think now that you're at the point that you're at, probably, well, I assume at some point going for Series A, or Series B, sorry. What round are you on?
Series A, yeah,
Yeah,
we've done the
Series A,
seed round and
the
the
seed round it
uncapped stage
was.
so far.
And do you think now, because I think we briefly chatted about it, bringing that outside, particularly in tech. So when I'm asked to do a CTO search or even an engineering search, 50-50, people don't really care if they come from insurance or, shall we say, an insure tech that's been there, done it, you know, uh, a Lemonade, a Kin, insure, whatever, these big companies that have went through that scale. Do you think now it's important that you find one, that missionary kind of building mindset, but also bring that insure tech in as well? Or do you kind of see the insure tech as more of a nice to have within engineering?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, right? Like, of course, they would have
Yeah.
both. And it's funny when you mention Lemonade and some of the other ones that have gone through what a lot of people have been called InsurTech 1.0.
Yeah.
That is what happened. You had all these people come from outside of insurance and say like, oh, well, this is, slow and terrible, like we can do it better, but they didn't actually have any insurance experience. And so they built these large, growth at no cost companies, and you see it biting them now. Well, they have like 200% combined ratios against the premiums they're generating, and their stock is through the floor. So for me, if I see somebody that has both, I will immediately, put it to the top of the list. But that being said, from what I think you can teach more quickly between like great engineering practices versus learning the underlying things that we need to know from insurance so far, and so far it's been insurance, and we do have the 100+ years of insurance people already to help us as we start coming up with our own ideas about how we can make this process better. We bounce it back off them. They sit in on our meetings and they say, well, yeah, that could work, here's why, or no, X, Y, and Z.
Because yeah, it's the reason I ask as well to a degree is that it's the way that insurance moves in terms of innovation. They think in decades, not in getting stuff out, shipping stuff out every day, 20 times a day, and that can be reliant on the industry to some degree. So it's just, you know what engineers are like sometimes. They want to move fast and move quick, but maybe there's that learning curve which or understanding that just comes more with someone that's done it at an insurtech. But yeah, it's interesting kind of viewpoint from yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a good part to emphasize, right? Like you can when I came in, that it wasn't a challenge in the sense that like it stopped me from doing stuff. It was like it was an opportunity because now the my customers, the underwriters, are expecting stuff to take months to get done. But any any small piece more than a month is better, and that's like I'm used to turning stuff around in days and hours, right? That's what you do at small startups and different industries. Now, obviously, there's some things that have been hard from the slow standpoint, like we're an MGA, so we have our front end carriers and our reinsurance, and sometimes getting changes accepted by them can take a little while. So like the code will be done and waiting for approval from outside influences. And that's, been an interesting piece to swallow, because most places I've ever worked has always been the engineering, building the product out has been the slow part that you have to wait on, and not here.
And then kind of finishing point, but I thought with you guys, you're never kind of fully done building that culture, particularly not where you guys are, but seems like you have a lot of kind of fun stuff, and it's things that I'm asked of in terms of what other companies are doing, and from a remote perspective, that is because you guys are fully remote. That's correct.
Yep.
And and just trying to engage because I'm fully remote, but Alex and Sophie, who have their own respective podcasts, and they are in the office, and then we have Erin who's in the US, so sometimes you do feel quite disconnected. But I loved what you guys did, from the thing that came from the CEO, where you give someone $500 to go and buy something, then get them to take a photo of it. And then there was another few bits and pieces, but from a cultural perspective, there's things that were just different that what you guys were doing, which I loved.
Yeah, I love that idea. That was from our COO. So when we bound our first policy, they sent out an email, and it's like everybody that is at the company gets $500, and you can go do whatever you want with it. Go to a nice dinner, you go gamble, put it on red at a roulette table. You could, rent 5 jet skis for your friends, whatever you want. And the only criteria is that you have to take a picture of whatever you end up doing. And so they created a book of everybody's picture, and the first deck page of the policy, and they given it out to everybody. So it's like you're saying, it's little things like that I think are great. It's hard, right? Like nobody knows how to do remote perfectly yet.
Yeah.
And one of the things outside of those bonding ideas and just celebrating successes on like an inordinate basis is when you build out your team and when they start, what are like some of the foundational principles that really set you apart. And one for us is just we trust implicitly when people come on board that they're gonna make the right decision, that here's a company credit card and you buy what you need to do to get your job done. And it's that sort of empowering idea of the team is greater than the individual that Ledgebrook really stands behind. And we've seen it now. Do we get it wrong sometimes? Sure. But that's where you've got to learn from your mistakes and just continue to build upon them.
Yeah, so true. Nathan, I could chat to you for quite a bit sometime, but I'm conscious of your time. You're a busy man. So I guess that just kind of brings us nicely to the end of this. But thank you for coming on and giving us your time. It was great to have you on.
Yeah, I was very happy you invited me, and love to share about Ledgebrook and everything we're working to build.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can maybe make this meeting in an in-person in New York at some point. I know there's enough InsurTech events, but yeah, as I say, thanks again for the time.